Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima, and I would like to talk to you for a bit about my 10 favorite games of the year, because I don't have any other videos ready to go out on Christmas Day because of technical issues and a couple of other things that have just gotten in the way, but, well, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can really do about that, and I just kind of ran out of time. So, I'm just gonna go through my 10 games of the year in no particular order except for the game of the year itself. Plus, I've got a couple of other games off to the side, and I will admit for my first game that I've kind of cheated, because this game didn't actually come out in this year, but I played it this year, but I can't think of any other game that I would be happy to have fill this slot, so I'm just going to put it in this slot anyway. So the first game on the list, and this isn't in any particular order except for the game of the year, has to be Detroit Become Human, because it's really well done. It's David Cage's game concepts polished to, I'm not going to say a mirror shine, there's probably like minor problems that I honestly don't remember, but it's the best execution of this concept that I have seen in video games. It's got a great story. There is an absolutely ridiculous amount of branching paths you can take. It looks great. It's got a really good presentation to it, even if it's not rendering at like 4K. I think it might be rendering at like 1440p or something. I couldn't tell you, but yeah, it's got some great acting. The characters are really well done. They're well written and they're quite enjoyable to follow around. And it does the gameplay side of the David Cage games great. The controls work absolutely fine. There's next to no really confusing things. And the investigation parts are great too. It's just a really well, nicely done, nicely rounded package. And I played through the entire thing the day that I started it, which is really impressive considering that your first run of this game is probably going to be somewhere in the 12-hour area. So yeah, that's great. It's really well done. And if you have PlayStation Plus and you have a PlayStation 5, you can get this game for no extra cost. So if you haven't done that by now and you've got those two things, go do it. It's a really good time, trust me. My second game is going to be the most anticipated game of the past decade, because man, there was a lot of hype surrounding this, but I actually managed to keep my hype in check, and I think that worked out for the best. So my second game has to be Cyberpunk 2077, because it does a really good job at drawing you into its world. It's got an absolutely lovingly built Night City. It is an absolutely glorious backdrop. It looks amazing. And it's got tons of little nooks and crannies that you can go hide in and hide quests in. There are tons of quests as well, and they are all over the place, from having to pick up abandoned AI taxis, to talking to a vending machine that's gone nearly sentient, to really over-the-top things like people with cybernetic enhancements being sent to war and then having their enhancements checked out. Or one where there's a group of celibate to enhancements monks that get forcibly kidnapped and are forced to have augments attached to them. Little things like that that really help build out the world, its characters, and what they're like. And it's also great at the world building just in general, with a ton of really interesting concepts, a bunch of great ideas, and the gunplay is pretty good as well, with some ridiculous power-ups and stuff that you can get later on. It gets really cool really quickly, and I put 20 hours into it, and I wasn't ready to stop, but I had to for my video, and man, as soon as I get a bit of extra time on my hands, I'm going to be going through the rest of the game, because it is a delight to troll through Night City. And as soon as they get around to fixing up the console ports, or maybe releasing the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X versions, or just having a few bug fixes and maybe a DLC expansion on PC, I wholeheartedly recommend you go and pick this one up. So my third game is something completely different. It's probably the only indie game that's well and truly turned up on this list, but man, if it doesn't go to a more deserving one. And it makes Ace Combat blush, because it does a few things better than Ace Combat. Project Wingman is glorious as a sort of tribute to the things that Ace Combat are. The air combat feels great. There's a ton of weaponry, there's a lot of different kinds of enemies, and all of the campaign missions are not only built with some great voice acting and really well done cutscenes, but some really good mission design as well. So there is a lot to go into and dig into there, and it actually reshuffles everything on the mercenary difficulty, so there's room for a second playthrough. And there's also a completely separate conquest mode, which while I didn't like it very much when the game first launched, they've actually done a few patches for it, which have massively improved things. So I'm more than happy to give this one a whirl. Also, it's got full-on virtual reality support across the entire game. And that it's got to be the best example of an arcade flight sim that we've got on the platform. It's better than Star Wars Squadrons. Hell, I might even call it better than some of the more hardcore flight sims. But then again, those are meant for a niche. But man, if there is one game that I would recommend you pick up if you want to know what Ace Combat is about, go get Project Wingman. Not only is it cheaper, it's really goddamn good. Demon's Souls. That's all I have to say, because this remake is absolutely beautiful. It is the best looking game that has come out on console, except for maybe one other that I might point out in a second. It is a wonderful experience because I played the original Demon's Souls, but not back when it came out, but back on the PlayStation 3. And it was a bit janky. There were some things I didn't like about it, and it was kind of hard to keep up with it when I realized I had to do things like grind healing grasses or something along those lines. But with the remake, which makes it run unbelievably smoothly at 60 frames a second, which I absolutely recommend that you play at, it gives everything that little touch-up that it needs to be that much smoother and that much more satisfying from moment to moment. And it cuts the loading times to basically nothing, so it becomes really easy to do things like grind healing grasses, or go back and forth looking for certain secrets or what have you. And of course, it's a Souls game, so it's got that really hardcore level of difficulty, except it's a fair bit easier. It's nowhere near the level of, say, Dark Souls 3, but it's still quite a challenge, and I enjoyed fighting my way through it, and I kind of had to resist just dropping back in and going for another run once I finished it. It is an impressive remake. It's got to be the best thing that's ever come out of Blue Point at this point, and I wholeheartedly recommend you get it alongside your PlayStation 5 if you decide to get one, of course. Another game that I recommend getting alongside your PlayStation 5, because it's arguably the most beautiful game I've ever seen on console, would have to be Ghost of Tsushima, because Ghost of Tsushima is unbelievable. I've played PC games that don't look as good as this. The art direction, the style, just the level of detail of things like gardens where you've got flower petals flying around you constantly. The weather effects, the way the grass, the trees, and the flowers all sway in the wind. It's all unbelievably good looking, and it's kept me going on horse the entire time, throughout the entire game, because it's so goddamn nice to look at. And it's really helped out by the fact that it's got some great gameplay as well. It's a slipstreamed version of that thing that everybody hates about Sony exclusives, the third-person action-adventure with stealth and crafting elements, but it's got all of those just carved down to the absolute basics, so it doesn't really get in the way as much. The combat is very satisfying. The one-on-one duels are some of the prettiest parts of the game, and the stories they tell through the main quest and the side quests are all really enjoyable, and you get to see some really beautiful sights, like when you're doing things like haikus, or you're going on the ancient tales and you get to see these lovely, like, ink-drawn cutscenes. Japan, like a lot of Japan's gamers have said that this game does Japan better than Japan does in their own games. It's ridiculously good as a result. Now, I've talked about 5 games so far, but I want to go off track a little bit to talk about a game that most people who know me, which is like 2 of you, that would pick to be on this list, and that is Yakuza Like a Dragon. But Yakuza Like a Dragon is not on this list because it's one of my favorite games, but because it's probably my biggest disappointment of the entire year, because it just doesn't do anything anywhere near as well as the other games do. The story is really poorly paced, and it's only held up by the fact that Ichiban and his party are actually a really fun cast of characters. The side activities are all kind of dreadful, which is really weird for a series that is known for its absolutely fantastic side activities. The combat, which has been swapped to turn-based RPG stuff, is unbelievably boring, doesn't have much in the way of mechanical depth, and it forces you to grind a lot. And it gets really, really frustrating at the end of the day. And at the end of the day, Ijincho is just not a really nice place to be. Not very much about it is memorable. Even the side stories aren't able to pick up the slack. They're just nowhere near as diverse or as deep as some of the stories that have come up in like the previous Yakuza games. And I'm just disappointed in pretty much every facet of it. This is the one Yakuza game that I thought to myself at the end of the day, I don't want to play this anymore. On every other Yakuza game, even the ones that I've played on PlayStation 2, I thought to myself, I want to come back to this and see what's in the rest of it later. I was just playing through real quick to get up to speed when Yakuza 0 came out. And this is the one game in the series that I've said to myself, I've had enough, I don't need to see anymore. And that is the biggest disappointment to me of this year. Let's go back to the non-disappointments though. Game number 6 on my list of Game of the Year games is 13 Sentinels, because 13 Sentinels is really well done. It's a visual novel crossed with some real-time tactics shenanigans going on, with a ridiculously deep story that they have actively said was an absolute nightmare to write, and I believe them because there is a lot of crap going on. When you have 13 different characters you can tackle in any order that you wish, you have to put in a lot of legwork in order to not screw things up. But it is a really enjoyable story with some great characters, an intense amount of details, a lot of reveals, and it is great fun to go through all of it. And then off to the side, you get this relatively interesting real-time tactics situation where every character has their own unique tactics that they can deploy against the enemy. And in order to keep a chain of successful missions going on, you need to be constantly swapping members in and out to give them a break and not overload everyone so that you're only stuck with 2 people defending the core on one particular mission. It's a really good just combination example of this, and it's probably going to be one of the most niche titles of the year. Hell, a bunch of bloody journalists have been saying it's one of the most niche titles of the year, and I don't know how they managed to pull that off, because the journalists usually hate Japan, but whatever, it's still really good, you should still go buy it. Yeah, Doom Eternal had to be on here at some point, because it is an absolutely fantastic example of retro sensibilities with modern day game design. Jesus. So it is a really enjoyable first-person shooter with some great tactics. You've got a lot of different weapons, but you have to be constantly swapping between them because you're really low on ammo half the time. There's a ton of different kinds of enemies that all need to be taken down in different ways and have different weapons effective against them. Except for the Marauder. The Marauder can go fuck a cactus. But outside of that, it's a really good example of an enemy roster. It's only slightly let down by the fact that the platforming can be a little bit jank, and the story around it is not as interesting as one might hope, although a lot of stuff gets blown up, and I approve of that. But it is still some of the best goddamn first-person shooter gameplay of the last decade, and I wholeheartedly recommend it to literally anyone. And goddamn, when those 2 DLC packs come out, I'm going to be going through them the same way I did the Doom Eternal itself, which is play the entire damn game in one day, because that's what I did with Doom Eternal, and I do not regret it. Tell you what's impossible to play through the entirety of in one day though, everything that is included in Dreams, because Dreams is not so much a game as it is a ridiculously flexible game creation platform. There are a stupid number of tools here available in order to create a wide variety of different experiences, and it is helped out immensely by how impressive the entire platform is on a technical level. There are some games that run like crap, we can't avoid that, but they all load almost instantly, and there is an absolutely great set of tools with a great set of controls, and they added VR support, so almost everything in the bloody game can be played with VR support, or you can go and make your own stuff in VR. And there is nothing on PC like that right now. There's things like Modbox, but they are nowhere near as user-friendly or as extensible as Dreams is. And it is an amazing effort. And I will be going back to this game to playing what its users come up with for years. And I applaud Media Molecule for doing such an amazing job with this entire thing as a platform. And now to talk about the one VR game entirely that made it onto this list, although 3 out of 10 have been VR games so far, if you want to be non-specific about it. But man, Half-Life Alyx is just so good at what it does. I never got the hype behind Half-Life 2, and I've played through that game twice. And I've played through episode 1 and episode 2, and I have played a bit of the original Half-Life. But when I played Half-Life Alyx, I got it. The environmental storytelling, the impressively polished level design, the simple but incredibly satisfying gameplay, and just wrapping it all up in an impressively oppressive, weird rhyme to say there, excuse me, the impressively oppressive City 17 is a absolutely fantastic experience through and through. It's one of the best optimized VR games I've ever played. It runs great, and I played through the entire game in one goddamn day without getting motion sick, although I did get kind of stuck when I had to turn around to find a goddamn button. Bloody hell. The fact that you need to physically turn around in VR is still something I've not gotten used to, but the 12 hours I spent with it were majestic, and it is absolutely the best virtual reality game that has been made to date. And if you have a PC that's even remotely capable of playing it, and a headset, you should have this in your library yesterday, because goddamn, it really does show you what VR is capable of. Now, before I get to my game of the year, and you might have noticed I've already done 9 slots here, so the next game isn't going to be a Vita game, unfortunately, but the Vita is just kind of done, if I'm being honest with you, because I only played 2 good Vita games this year. 2 Vita games that I would actively call good. I've played a bunch of games that came out on the Vita, but that I didn't play on the Vita, but yeah, for the 2 games that I played on Vita that I would call the best, we only have Utawaru Umono Prelude to the Fallen, which is like a given. All I had to do was not screw the localization up, and it was already in my top 100 games of all time. So it is, and that's how it is. And then there's Xenocrisis, which is a almost there port of an absolutely fantastic arcade-style game that has Smash TV influences. It almost runs perfectly. The controls are great, but they're let down by the fact the game doesn't run perfectly. The frame rate is almost rock solid, but it's let down by the fact that it doesn't run perfectly. And man, it would be on top if I could, like, just realistically convince myself to play through it with just these little frame drops. But I played the game on PC, and I know how important it is to maintain a solid frame rate. So it was just slightly disappointing that I just couldn't get it that one last step to get there. But unfortunately, there's just not that much on Vita to talk about, so outside of that, that's going to be it for at least my top 10 list. And you might be wondering, now that I've talked about my top 9, my most biggest disappointment, and the best Vita game this year, what the hell could possibly be my game of the year? What is the one game that I enjoyed the most? What is the one game that gave me the least niggles? What is the one game that didn't overstay its welcome? And what is the one game that had that perfect mixture of enjoyable variety, level design, gameplay, and just even general nostalgia? Yeah, I don't know what convinced me to go with Astros Playroom for this one, but just goddamn, every time I think to myself, what was my favorite game this year? What is something that I so thoroughly enjoyed that I can't think of anything bad to say about it? It's Astros Playroom. It looks absolutely wonderful. It has some rock solid gameplay with a ton of different variety things that you can do, like say climbing up the wall with the triggers, and they're pressure sensitive so you can't press down too hard, or the springy thing you control with the controller, or the ball that you roll with the trackpad and it's actually really sensitive and gets your inputs absolutely perfectly. And the variety of the levels, how they all look different, how they're all dedicated to one of the PlayStation console generations, how you can get all those little trinkets to give you a bit of nostalgia. And that final boss just kind of came out of nowhere, but I enjoyed it all the same nevertheless. And it's only like 2 hours long, but it's got some speedrun challenges, it's got collectibles that you probably won't get on your first time through, and it's really easy to load into those levels and go looking for the extra stuff. So it's short, but it's incredibly sweet. So I find myself just enjoying this so much, and just the cherry on top, it's the pack-in for the PlayStation 5, so I sort of kind of technically got it for free. So yeah, I am more than happy to call this my game of the year. It is incredibly well done. Now, you can disagree and say that Half-Life Alyx or Ghost of Tsushima or Cyberpunk or Project Wingman deserve to be in this slot instead, and I would agree with you, but as I said, when I just thought back onto the game that I enjoyed the most and had the least niggles with, it was Astros Playroom. It's just a perfect 100% just good stuff in my mind. And that is worth Game of the Year to me personally. And I think it's a wonderful example of a pack-in game. And I think it's probably the best pack-in game that's ever come out on a console. That is legitimately my opinion at this point. It's great, and I can't praise it enough. So with all of that said, that's my top 10 games of this year. And if you disagree with any of my choices, or you think a different game should be Game of the Year, please feel free to tell me in the comments, although chances are they might get buried by YouTube's really overprotective comment system these days. I don't know why, it just seems to be really annoyed with people who post comments on this channel. But anyway, I was going to talk about games I was looking forward to over the next year or so, but my throat is actually starting to get really sore. I'm worried I'm not even going to make it through this segment. So I think we're just going to leave that for maybe towards the new year, because I plan on taking a break. You won't be seeing any videos from me, at least for the next week or so. Hopefully I'll have some neat ideas to bring to you in the new year. With that said though, if you have anything you'd like to say, if there's any games that you think I missed this year that I should check out over the next couple of weeks, please feel free to leave a comment. I'm always open to some new games that I missed over the year, except for The Last of Us 2. I knew when the spoilers came out for that I was not going to like the way that game was going whatsoever, so I never picked it up. So if you're going to try and defend The Last of Us 2, please don't. I've already heard all the defenses. I still decided that I didn't want to play that anyway, so alright. I'll leave you all to it. Considering this is going up on Christmas Day, have a good Christmas. This has been Blue Maxima, and I'll see you all in the new year.